They made him shut down his grill on his own land. HOA claimed his backyard had been temporarily annexed under a new perimeter rule they never filed with the county. That Sunday, Jonathan was barbecuing ribs beneath the sycamore he'd planted for his late wife. His grandkids were laughing barefoot in the grass. That's when Karen Holbrook showed up, president of the Silver Pines HOA, heels clicking, clipboard in hand, sunglasses reflecting everything but empathy. "This setup doesn't align with the neighborhood aesthetic," she snapped, pointing at his smoker like it was a trash fire. Karen thought she had it all locked down: legal language, silence from the board, and the confidence that no one would dare push back. She saw Jonathan as just another old man with too many stories and not enough lawyers. But what she didn't know, what she never saw coming, was that Jonathan had once run into burning buildings for a living, and this time he was going to let the fire spread. The aftermath? It burned through the HOA's lies, the developer's secrets, and Karen's entire reputation. But let's start at the beginning. The grill hissed softly, a steady sizzle of cherrywood smoke curling into the warm Ohio air. Jonathan Mayfield flipped a slab of ribs with practiced ease, the edge of his tongs scraping across cast iron. His grandkids squealed in the background, darting through the sprinkler jets like fireflies. It was Sunday. It was his Sunday, and he guarded it like it was sacred scripture. He stood barefoot on his back patio, a little patch of concrete he'd poured himself back in 1992, before his youngest was even born. The deck sagged slightly near the edge where the tree roots had shifted the ground, but Jonathan liked it that way. It reminded him that nature always won in the end. Just like his wife used to say. "Don't fight the roots, Johnny," she'd laugh, brushing clay off her gardening gloves. "Let them curl under you." Her chair still sat under the old sycamore. He never moved it. The house wasn't much. Single-story, wood panel, with faded blue shutters and a rusting tin mailbox that looked like it had been punched in the jaw, but it was his. It wasn't under mortgage. It wasn't under anybody's thumb. He bought this land cash after retiring from the fire department, built it up with his brother and 3 buddies, and planned to die right here. Maybe even have his ashes mixed in with the barbecue rub. That Sunday was like most. Grill on by noon, lemonade in the cooler, and family rolling in by 1 p.m. His daughter, Maria, had brought her famous potato salad, and his grandson James was already trying to sneak spoonfuls before the burgers even hit the flames. Bruce, from 3 doors down, quiet guy, wore the same Vietnam vet cap every day, wandered over with a half-empty 6-pack and a bag of pretzels. No invitation, just tradition. Then came the Lexus. Jonathan saw it slow roll up the gravel at the edge of his property. Sleek, shiny, and smug. Not many Lexuses down their road, and no one parked diagonally across his culvert like that unless they were trying to make a point. Out stepped Karen Holbrook. Black suit in 81-degree heat. Clipboard. Silver Pines HOA badge glinting on a plastic lanyard. Sunglasses that probably cost more than Jonathan's riding mower. She stood still for a second, arms crossed like she was absorbing the blight before her. He watched her eyes sweep across the lawn, past the picnic table, over to the fire pit ring, the flags, the old rocking chair under the sycamore. She didn't smile, she didn't blink. She just marched forward like a high school vice principal catching teens behind the gym. "Mr. Mayfield." She didn't wait for a reply. "I'm here to inform you this event is in violation of Silver Pines Community Code." Jonathan turned down the grill flame. Not because she deserved his attention, but because fire safety was still in his blood. "Afternoon," he said plainly. "You seem lost. Silver Pines ends at lot 48. This here's lot 52. Karen clicked her pen once. It was sharp, perforating. As of the HOA perimeter revision ratified May 3rd, your property now falls under our Community Enhancement Oversight. Section 14B. You should have received the notification. He blinked. Enhancement what now? You're hosting an unsanctioned event. There's amplified sound. She motioned towards the Bluetooth speaker quietly playing Aretha Franklin. Smoke pollutants, foot traffic in excess of 6 guests, and fire hazards. Jonathan stepped off the patio, his boots crunching the gravel between them. This isn't an event. This is a family meal. You're serving food to non-residents. They're my blood. She raised the clipboard like a badge. The bylaws are clear. He took a breath. Inhale through the nose, slow exhale. He'd learned that trick from his counselor after his wife passed. Look, he said, voice steady. This land has been mine since before Silver Pines even had a name. I got the deed in my desk, and the survey lines burned into my memory. You don't have jurisdiction here. Karen's lips twitched. Not a smile. Something smugger. The council approved it unanimously. You're now part of the visual corridor. We have standards to uphold. You redrew a line and decided I'm part of your postcard? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her tote bag and pulled out a manila folder. This is a formal notice of preliminary violation. You have 72 hours to cease all non-compliant gatherings. After that, fines begin accruing. You're trying to tell me I can't host a Sunday barbecue with my family. In my own backyard? We suggest indoor alternatives. Or better, submit a gathering request with a $150 inspection fee. That ensures compliance. Jonathan's face darkened. And what about the 3 cameras I saw y'all install across the street? The ones pointed right at my tree line? Karen stiffened. They're security measures. Then why are they pointed at me and not at the street? No response. Just that silent, superior look. From the edge of the porch, little Ellie, his youngest granddaughter, held a plastic cup of lemonade and stared at Karen with wide, confused eyes. "Grandpa, is she taking our grill away?" Jonathan's heart broke a little. Not because he thought she could, but because in that moment he realized she believed she could. Karen took a photo of the grill with her phone. Expect follow-up enforcement. This is your first and final courtesy warning. She turned on her heel, heels clacking against the gravel, and got into her Lexus. She reversed in a sharp arc, spitting pebbles into his rose bushes, and was gone. The air felt different after she left. The smoke didn't smell sweet anymore. The ribs turned bitter on the tongue. The laughter faded. The lawn felt smaller, less like home, more like property. Jonathan stood still for a long while. He didn't flip the ribs, didn't grab his lemonade, didn't say a word. The night was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that creeps beneath your skin. No wind, no frogs, just the soft buzz of an old porch light and the metallic click of Jonathan's front screen door as it bounced gently in the frame. He stepped out in flannel pajama pants and his late wife's faded Cleveland Browns hoodie, holding a steaming mug of black coffee. Sleep hadn't come. Not after the stunt Karen pulled. He hadn't told the kids. Didn't want to ruin their Sunday. But he hadn't stopped thinking about that smug smirk, or the way she called his family non-residents, like they were intruders on land he bled to pay for. Like the backyard where he buried his dog and planted a sycamore for his wife was now just event perimeter jurisdiction. When he reached the grill, the smell of ash and cold metal greeted him like a ghost. That's when he saw it. The letter taped carefully across the lid, already collecting dew. It wasn't handwritten, not HOA stationery. It was lawyered, typed, numbered, formal, cold. Dear Mr. Mayfield, This letter serves as official cease and desist notice regarding your unauthorized community gathering dated June 2, 2025. As per the updated bylaw Section 14B of the Silver Pines HOA Perimeter Jurisdiction Policy, your property is now subject to aesthetic and nuisance regulations. Any further violations will result in immediate fines, lien assessment, or additional enforcement action permissible under HOA arbitration standards. Respectfully, Martha L. Kirschbaum, Legal Counsel, Silver Pines HOA. At the bottom was a black and white photo. His backyard, taken from above, time-stamped 2:17 p.m. His smoker, his daughter, his flag, all labeled with red arrows like they were crime scene evidence. But what caught him cold, what twisted his stomach, was the angle. The photo had been taken from height, possibly from a mounted pole camera, or worse, a drone. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. You don't just point a camera at a man's grave tree and call it governance. He tore the letter from the grill, folded it once, and slipped it into the pocket of his hoodie. Then he did what he always did when something smelled wrong. He went to the shed. The old army trunk in the back hadn't been opened in years, but inside it was the gear he'd held on to from his volunteer firefighting days. A high-lumen flashlight, a thermal scanner, and, more importantly, a pair of surplus military binoculars with night vision assist. He moved through his yard like a soldier on recon. Every 30 feet he scanned. Along the east fence he saw nothing, but when he reached the old oak tree along the northern fence line, the one he always thought was technically the neighbor's, he spotted something off. A thin, vertical pole, barely thicker than a broomstick, rising from behind a bush on the HOA side. It had a small, blinking red diode and a plastic dome. Infrared capable. Motion tracking, he whispered. The camera was pointed directly at his deck, and it wasn't mounted on HOA land. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered. Using his phone flashlight, he walked the property line, just to be sure. His deed had the line running 12 feet beyond that bush. He'd measured it himself when he replaced the fence after the storm in '09. That camera was on his property, and that's when he realized they hadn't just overstepped metaphorically, they'd physically trespassed, installed equipment without consent, and were using illegally gathered footage to threaten him. The coffee in his stomach curdled to acid. By Monday morning, the anger had simmered into something colder, focus. Jonathan wasn't a man of long speeches or vengeance, but he understood pressure, and Karen Holbrook had just given him the kind that forged diamonds. He knocked on Gus Darnell's front door at 8 o'clock sharp, 2 coffees in hand. I brought the strong stuff, he said. Good, Gus grunted. We're gonna need it. The retired attorney's den smelled like old paper and lived-in arguments. Every wall lined with bookshelves, case files, thick tomes on property law, and little sticky notes that said things like Statute 5321.04, print again. Gus had already cleared off the dining table and laid out a manila folder with Jonathan's name scribbled in red ink. I didn't sleep, Gus said, rubbing his temples. Started digging, and I don't say this lightly, Johnny, but what Karen pulled isn't just illegal, it's bold. Real bold. HOA boards don't usually go off property unless they're desperate. Jonathan sipped his coffee. So, what are we looking at? Gus opened the folder. Inside were printouts, maps, highlighted property lines, a copy of Jonathan's original deed, and a second version of the Silver Pines HOA zoning boundary, one Gus downloaded from the HOA website just hours earlier. But this version was different. Sloppy. See this? Gus pointed at a jagged yellow overlay that extended like a tentacle past the official Silver Pines border. That's new, Jonathan said. That wasn't on any map I've seen. Because they didn't file it through the county, it's only on their internal website. Karen called it a visual jurisdictional buffer zone. Made it look official. Problem is, they never submitted the updated perimeter to the zoning board. It's a forgery. And the cease and desist? Based on a zone that doesn't exist. Jonathan's hands clenched. So, she's using fake maps to send real threats. Gus nodded grimly. And worse? I ran the name of the HOA's legal counsel, Martha L. Kirschbaum. You know what I found? Don't tell me. Not licensed in Ohio. Not anywhere. Best I can tell, she's a paralegal who used to work at a debt collection firm in Tulsa. And now, she's signing official enforcement letters? That's fraud. Jonathan stood, pacing. She's got cameras on my property. She's mailing threats with fake legal signatures. And now she's pretending she can redraw my fence line with a Google overlay? Gus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. This isn't just about you. I guarantee you, she's done this to others. You think she's testing it on me first? You're the canary, Johnny. Jonathan remembered something from 2 weeks earlier. He was in town getting lumber when he overheard a man in the hardware aisle arguing about HOA permits. They fined me because my kid had a trampoline, the guy barked into his phone. On my back lawn, that ain't even their turf. At the time, Jonathan brushed it off. But now, he was starting to see the pattern. Karen wasn't managing a community. She was building a perimeter of fear. The first outreach. By noon, Jonathan and Gus had a list. 5 properties that sat on the border of Silver Pines. All owned by residents who had complained about fines or policy shifts in the past 6 months. All received letters similar to his. They started making calls. The first was to Dennis Conway, a retired lineman who lived 2 lots north. "You're damn right I got a letter," Dennis growled over speakerphone. "Told me my tool shed had the wrong paint color. I built that thing in '87. You ever approve joining the HOA? Gus asked. Nope, never signed a thing. Did they install cameras? One right on the cul-de-sac pole, blinking red light like a Christmas ornament. We need to talk in person, Jonathan said. Within 3 hours, 3 neighbors had agreed to meet at Jonathan's house. By 6 p.m., 5 folding chairs were set up under the sycamore. The backyard meeting. Jonathan stood in front of them. Dennis, an elderly couple named the Bakers, and young Emily Wu, a graphic designer who worked remotely and had just bought her place last year. Gus stood by with the folder, now thicker than ever. I know this is a lot, Jonathan began, but if we don't push back, this doesn't stop at fences and fines. This is about control, about bullying, and about lying. He passed out copies of the cease and desist letter, alongside the satellite photos Gus printed showing camera placement and the fake HOA overlay. Emily frowned. Wait, this is my yard. That's my garden shed. They're surveilling my tomatoes? Worse, Gus said. They're using your existence to justify enforcement policy. It's an illusion of power. They hope you won't fight because it's easier to pay the fee. Dennis cracked his knuckles. I ain't paying a cent. Mrs. Baker held up the map. You're telling me these lines aren't real? Not unless you let them be, Jonathan said. But we need proof. We need statements, dates, copies of letters, and we need to go public. Loud. Over the next 24 hours, the neighbors sent in photos. HOA reps installing poles in the dead of night. Warnings about non-compliant lawn coloration. Notices for unapproved family occupancy numbers, i.e., grandkids visiting overnight. Emily even caught a HOA subcontractor trespassing with a ladder, trying to adjust the angle of the camera pointed at her kitchen window. I yelled, he ran, I got his license plate. Jonathan wrote it all down. Gus made copies. They built a case. Jonathan Mayfield stared at the red-stamped warning on the letter like it was a joke written in blood. Final warning before enforcement. It was absurd, offensive, but more than that, it was dangerous. Because now, it wasn't just about grills and smoke. It was about ownership. The HOA was trying to put a lien on his property. "They're playing war," he said to Gus that morning. "And they don't know I've already survived one." Gus slammed his mug down hard enough to rattle the cutlery drawer. "They filed it. I just spoke to the recorder's office. There's a preliminary lien notice logged in your parcel file. Not enforceable, not yet, but it's in the system." "What does that mean?" "It means they're laying the foundation to legally claim part of your land value, like squatters with a printer." Jonathan's jaw tightened. He'd faced flames, collapsed roofs, sobbing families, but nothing boiled his blood like bureaucrats trying to rewrite his reality. Then it's time people heard what's going on. That night, Emily Wu helped Jonathan set up a Facebook group. Stop HOA Overreach, Silver Pines and Beyond. She posted photos of the fake map overlays, the illegal cameras, the fake attorney's cease and desist letters, and a video of Gus calmly explaining what a lien actually is. The post hit 200 shares in 2 hours. By morning, a local journalist named Raina Colin from Channel 7 News reached out. "Is it true the HOA is placing liens on non-member properties?" "Come to my backyard," Jonathan said. "I'll show you where they planted the flag." At 3 p.m., Raina arrived with a 2-person crew. The interview was quiet, controlled, but powerful. Jonathan stood in front of the smoker with the cease and desist letter in one hand and a laminated copy of his deed in the other. "This is my land," he said into the camera. "I built this fence. I paid these taxes. And some clipboard tyrant doesn't get to erase that with a fake zoning map." Raina raised her eyebrow. "And what's your message to the HOA?" Jonathan looked directly into the lens. "You can try to scare me. You can fine me. You can send your fake lawyers and phony letters, but you're going to need more than red ink to take my ribs off this grill." The sellout that night, Channel 7 aired the story at 6:05 p.m., and it spread like kerosene on charcoal. Local Reddit La Sala threads exploded. A popular retired teacher commented, "Karen Holbrook fined me $500 for grass unevenness. Turns out my lawn guy was blind in one eye." Another man replied, "I paid $1,200 in mystery visual disruption fees after I installed a flagpole." HOA forums began buzzing with one name: Holbrook. The pressure was building. Meanwhile, inside the HOA office, Karen Holbrook watched the segment with tight lips and glassy eyes. She turned off the TV and stared at the trembling glass of white wine in her hand. The phone rang. "Karen?" came a voice. "Ben Merritt, HOA Vice President." "What the hell is happening?" "It's contained," she lied. "It's not. People are emailing. Some are talking about legal action. You told us this would never make it to media. They're just fringe homeowners. They don't even belong here. You signed a lien request for Lot 52 without board vote." "Because I had to. We're losing the aesthetic buffer." "Karen, you've gone too far." She hung up without saying goodbye. Back at Gus's house, Gus printed out the HOA charter and bylaws. And that's when he found something interesting. "Jonathan, look at this clause. Section 7.3, Aesthetic Enforcement Authority." "Right, but read the condition. Only enforceable upon written consent or confirmed voting majority by property owners within annexed territory. Gus tapped it hard. They never held a vote, and they never got your signature. That makes every fine, every letter, every enforcement threat legally void. They didn't overreach. They trespassed. Step forward. Legal filing. That Friday, Jonathan and Gus filed a formal complaint with the county clerk's office citing fraudulent perimeter expansion, unauthorized property lien threat, trespassing via surveillance installation, use of non-licensed legal counsel in official correspondence. They attached photos of the camera poles, comparisons of real versus fake zoning maps, 4 neighbor statements and 2 copies of false violation letters. And now, Gus said, sealing the envelope, we wait, but not quietly. Public escalation. By Sunday, Jonathan's post about the HOA's actions had 12,000 views. Raina followed up with a second story. Local HOA accused of fake maps, illegal surveillance. Karen tried to issue a rebuttal, a poorly written statement about protecting property values and ensuring safety compliance. But it backfired. People in nearby communities started sharing their own stories. The story grew from a backyard dispute into a county-wide conversation about unchecked HOA power. Final scene. HOA cracks Monday morning. Karen's Lexus sat in front of the HOA office like a lone tank on a battlefield. But inside, silence. Half the board had resigned over the weekend. The HOA secretary refused to speak to her. The treasurer demanded a pause on all outbound enforcement activity. And then Karen opened her email. One message. From the county assessor's office. Subject line. Inquiry into HOA perimeter boundary legality. Response required within 7 business days. She slumped back into her chair. And for the first time, Karen Holbrook, the woman who rewrote borders with a pen, felt like she was on the wrong side of the fence. By Tuesday morning, Jonathan's backyard had become more than just a yard. It was now a battleground, a symbol, and, to many in the county, a rallying cry. What began as a quiet story of one man standing up to his HOA had spread far beyond Silver Pines. The Facebook group passed 20,000 members. Journalists from 3 counties were calling Gus. Local politicians started using phrases like HOA accountability in tweets. But Jonathan wasn't interested in politics. He was interested in justice. And maybe, just maybe, in celebration. That morning, over coffee with Gus and Emily, he made the announcement. I'm throwing a cookout. You mean like next Sunday? Emily asked. No, I mean a town-wide barbecue. This Saturday, noon to sundown, right here, on my land. Gus blinked. That'll poke the bear. Good, let her feel poked. The plan. Jonathan laid it out like a military operation. Invites open to the public. Free entry. No HOA approval needed because it wasn't on HOA land. Guests, families, veterans, first responders, musicians, local farmers, food truck owners. Theme: community over control. Purpose: to raise awareness, encourage civic action, and serve some of the best ribs in Ohio. Emily smiled wide. You want me to build a page? Yeah, call it The Barbecue They Tried to Ban. Gus, skeptical but impressed, nodded. I'll notify the sheriff's office in advance, just in case Karen tries anything. The announcement goes public that night. Jonathan posted a video from under the sycamore tree. The caption read, I've been threatened, fined, surveilled, and lied to, all by a homeowners association I never joined. So this Saturday I'm inviting everyone. Neighbors, strangers, kids, dogs. Heck, bring your in-laws to my backyard. Free food, music, truth, because this land is mine, and I'm not alone anymore. The video went viral. Over 200,000 views in 24 hours. People started sending messages from across the country. We'll drive in from Columbus. Do you need volunteers? I'm bringing my grill and my grandma. HOA. Responds Karen Holbrook was livid. She called an emergency HOA meeting Thursday evening. Only 2 other members showed up. This is a direct provocation, she hissed. He's mocking the authority of this board. You forged documents, Karen, said Ben Merritt, vice president. That's what started this. We must respond. We have to stop the cookout. Ben leaned forward. And how exactly do you suggest we do that? Karen opened a folder labeled Emergency Perimeter Disruption Response. Section 15.4 of the bylaws, nuisance gatherings. If we claim it poses a disruption to the neighborhood, we can request temporary restriction from the sheriff's department. On land we don't legally control? They don't need to know that. Ben stood up. You're not dragging me down with you, Karen. He left. Karen stared at the folder in silence. Then she made a phone call. Sheriff's Office visit. Friday afternoon, a sheriff's cruiser rolled up to Jonathan's property. He met them at the fence with a calm expression and a folder in hand. His deed, the county's confirmation letter, and a printed copy of the Ohio Revised Code regarding private property rights. Deputy Miles looked young but tired. Mr. Mayfield, we received a noise complaint in advance of an event that hasn't happened yet, from the HOA. So, pre-crime now? Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Not exactly, the deputy smiled. We just wanted to make sure you were within your rights. Jonathan handed over the documents. I am, and I'll be recording the entire day. The deputy reviewed the pages, nodded, and said, Enjoy your cookout, sir. The day of the cookout, Saturday, 10:43 a.m. Cars lined both sides of the gravel road. Folding tables filled the yard. Speakers played Sam Cooke and Johnny Cash. Kids painted protest signs that read, Our yards, our rights, and no to HOA tyranny. Veterans in ball caps traded stories. A fire truck parked out front with flashing lights, not for an emergency, but because Jonathan's old station came to support. Local journalists set up tripods. A congressman's aide arrived with a press packet. Over 300 people showed up. Jonathan stood by the smoker, apron on, sweat glistening, and smiled as he pulled out racks of ribs that fell apart from their own weight. Gus limped up beside him. You did it. No, Jonathan said. We did. At 2:37 p.m., a white SUV pulled up across the road. Out stepped Karen Holbrook, visibly shaken. She wore the same dark glasses, but her usual calm was gone. She looked out at the crowd, at signs with her name on them, at cameras pointed in her face, and at one woman handing out printouts labeled Karen Holbrook's HOA Overreach Timeline, Source Verified. She tried to speak to a Channel 7 reporter, but they walked right past her, straight to Jonathan. When someone yelled, Go home, Karen! She turned, slipped slightly in the gravel, and retreated to her vehicle. It would be the last time she was seen in public for weeks. Jonathan speaks. As the sun began to drop, Jonathan climbed onto a flatbed trailer. He tapped the mic once. The chatter died. Some people tried to take something from me, and from all of you. They tried to call it policy, but let me tell you something I've learned as a firefighter, as a father, and now as a man on the wrong end of a clipboard. Control without consent is not community. It's tyranny dressed in khakis. So today, we did more than share ribs. We reclaimed what was ours. The crowd erupted. Cheering, applause, camera flashes. The music returned. Kids danced in the grass. Chapter closure. The letter that changed everything that night. As Jonathan was cleaning up empty lemonade pitchers, Gus walked over with an envelope. Just came by courier. Jonathan opened it. Inside was a formal notice. Karen Holbrook is under investigation for fraudulent enforcement, perimeter manipulation, and unauthorized legal representation. The county had frozen all HOA enforcement actions pending full review. Gus chuckled. Looks like the grill wasn't the only thing you smoked today. Chapter 6. Karen's Quiet War. For 2 weeks after the cookout, it seemed like the storm had passed. HOA enforcement had gone silent. The county froze all pending fines. Karen Holbrook vanished from public view. Neighbors walked by Jonathan's fence and gave him a thumbs up or a smile. People were baking him pies, but Jonathan had spent a lifetime understanding danger. And he knew too well. When the noise stops, that's when the fire creeps. And he was right. The first sign, a concerned neighbor. It began innocently. A man named Elliot Finch knocked on Jonathan's door one morning. Mid-40s, button-up shirt, nice smile. Said he just moved in down the road. "I heard about the cookout," he said. "Powerful stuff. My wife and I admire what you did." Jonathan shook his hand. "Appreciate it. You folks from around here? Originally New Jersey. Got transferred. Love the quiet." They talked about grills, zoning, property lines. Elliot seemed earnest, too earnest. And then came the casual line. "So, have you ever thought about subdividing this lot? I mean, you've got enough space to split and sell off half. Developers would pay top dollar." Jonathan stiffened. "This land's not for sale." Elliot nodded quickly. Of course. Just if you ever change your mind." He left with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The digging begins. That night, Gus looked him up. There's no record of any Elliot Finch on any recent real estate transfer nearby. So, who is he? What if I told you he used to work for a developer group called Tri-Point Residential Holdings? Sounds familiar? They're tied to the original developer of Silver Pines. Karen used to be a junior officer in their legal division. The connection was clear. Elliot was Karen's plant. A decoy, a scout, sent to test whether Jonathan could be lured, flipped, or bought. The second strike, false complaints. On the third Thursday after the cookout, Jonathan received a knock from a city code inspector. "Mr. Mayfield, we had a complaint filed about unpermitted structures on your property, namely the deck, smoker, and an unspecified water fixture." Jonathan blinked. "There's no water fixture. Mind if I take a look?" They walked the property. No violations were found. The inspector even chuckled. "This happens sometimes," he said. "We get anonymous reports from HOA boards trying to escalate pressure through us." The inspector filed the visit as unsubstantiated, but it went into county record. That was the goal. Karen wasn't trying to win in court. She was trying to bury him in process. The pressure mounts. By week 4, it got worse. Emily Wu, his ally, was denied a local design contract due to political activity. Dennis Conway found a letter in his mailbox threatening his VA benefits review. Anonymously mailed. The Bakers received a tax reassessment letter they couldn't explain. Gus shook his head at Jonathan's table. They formed a plan. Gus contacted a sympathetic land use attorney in Columbus, who agreed to file a request for disclosure of developmental intent under the state's Landowner Notification Act. The goal? Force TriPoint to submit all plans involving adjacent properties, including Jonathan's. If Karen gave them the idea that she had control of your land, or could force an easement through HOA power, we'll find the paper trail, Gus said. And when we do, then we break her, legally, publicly. Karen's final act in this chapter. Tuesday evening. Jonathan found a dead animal, a raccoon, dumped at the base of his smoker. Its fur matted, ribs broken. No note, no camera saw it. But he knew. This wasn't HOA protocol. It was Karen's desperation turned feral. He buried the animal himself, washed the patio with bleach, locked the gates, sat on the porch with his coffee and stared at the sycamore in silence. "This land was my peace," he whispered, "and now it's a battleground." Chapter end. Decision point. Wednesday morning, a call came. It was Raina, the reporter from Channel 7. "Jonathan, we've got something." "What is it?" "A leak, HOA emails, internal memos. Karen's name, TriPoint, coordination with code officials. I want to run it, but I need you to go on record." Jonathan closed his eyes for a long moment, then said, "Let's burn it down." Chapter 7. The Email Leak. They say sunlight is the best disinfectant, and by the time the emails leaked, the entire town of Marlow County was already squinting toward the smoke rising from Silver Pines. The documents arrived at Raina Colon's inbox just after midnight Tuesday, anonymously uploaded to a secure Dropbox her station set up months earlier for whistleblowers. The sender called themselves only HOA Watcher 57. Inside the folder, 213 internal emails, 4 signed attachments, 1 Excel spreadsheet labeled Noise Violation Forecast.xlsx, and a draft letter from Karen Holbrook to TriPoint Residential Holdings, dated 3 weeks before the cease and desist letter to Jonathan. Raina didn't sleep. She read every line. By dawn, she knew exactly what she had. The smoking gun. One email in particular made her stop breathing. Subject line, Strategic Leverage. Lot 52. From Karen.Holbrook@silverpines.cc to marketing@tripointdev.com. As discussed, I've initiated contact with the owner. He's resistant to formal inclusion, but legal framing under Section 14B should create pressure. Additionally, enforcement letters are being prepared by outside counsel under our template. Once citations begin, we believe Mr. Mayfield will see reason, or sell. If not, we may proceed to lien filing. Appearance of authority is key. And just below that, P.S. I've already notified zoning we may need backup noise complaints filed through neutral channels. That was it. Proof of intentional manipulation, false legal pressure, and collusion between an HOA president and a private developer. Channel 7's breaking report. At 6:00 p.m. sharp, Raina Colon stood live in front of the Silver Pines HOA office, wind whipping through her notes, the Channel 7 logo gleaming in the corner of the screen. "Good evening. I'm Raina Colon. Tonight, we bring you exclusive, leaked documents that raise serious questions about ethics, legality, and abuse of power in one of Marlow County's most prominent HOA boards." Behind her, the now infamous fence that marked the boundary of Jonathan's property stood like a line in the sand. We've obtained internal emails that appear to show Silver Pines HOA President Karen Holbrook coordinated with real estate developers to exert unlawful pressure on non-member property owners, with the intent to force sales and expand development plans. Among the targets, local resident and retired firefighter Jonathan Mayfield, who has become a symbol of resistance to what many now call stealth annexation. Reyna went on, quoting line after line, showing on-screen visuals of the emails, the map overlays, and HOA letterhead used by a non-licensed legal representative. And perhaps most disturbingly, she added, one message suggests that false noise complaints were to be submitted through third parties in order to build a case for forced action. The public reaction. Within hours, #KarenGate began trending on Twitter. Local forums and Facebook groups exploded with outrage. Even people outside of Marlow, from Florida to Michigan, were commenting, "This is why HOAs need federal regulation." Using fake lawyers and drone cameras? Someone needs to go to jail. Jonathan's are Rosa Parks, but with ribs. Reyna's report got picked up by regional affiliates, then statewide radio. Then the National HOA Reform Group in Washington, D.C., posted a reaction video. That evening, Jonathan stood once again under the sycamore tree, this time in front of a much larger crowd. Cameras from 5 networks, journalists from Cincinnati, a congressman's aide holding a notebook. He didn't speak long. "I never wanted a spotlight. All I wanted was to grill ribs with my grandkids on the land my wife and I built together. But when someone tries to scare you out of your own home, when they lie, forge, and threaten, you have 2 choices: duck or dig in your heels." He held up a printed copy of the email. "They said the appearance of authority was key, but let me tell you something. Truth has its own appearance, and now the world sees it." Karen's psychological collapse, off-screen scene. That same night, in a quiet, gated condo on the far side of town, Karen Holbrook sat alone. Her phone buzzed with over 400 unread emails. HOA board members had formally voted to suspend her powers. Her developer contact from TriPoint had stopped returning calls. And on her kitchen counter sat a letter from the State Bar Association, requesting a written response regarding her alleged impersonation of legal counsel. She opened a bottle of wine with shaking hands. Outside, someone spray-painted "liar" on the community welcome sign. Karen locked her door and drew the blinds. Chapter End. The beginning of consequences. Thursday morning. Gus received a call. "Jonathan, it's starting. The AG's office is reviewing the HOA's charter for potential revocation. They're opening a civil suit. Multiple counts: fraud, unlawful enforcement, malicious intent. And Karen? Subpoena inbound, but it gets better." "How?" Gus smiled. "The developer's now claiming they were misled by Karen. They're offering you money to drop a potential lawsuit." Jonathan stared across the lawn, hands in his pockets. "I don't want their money. Then what do you want?" He looked up at the sycamore. "I want them to say it, publicly, that this land was never theirs to touch." Chapter 8. The Public Apology. It was the first Saturday of fall when the letter finally came. A cream-colored envelope, embossed with a gold TriPoint logo, hand-delivered to Jonathan's door by a trembling young intern in a blazer 2 sizes too big. Jonathan didn't say a word, just nodded and took it inside. He stood in the kitchen, coffee going cold beside him, and opened the envelope slowly. Inside, 1. A letter of formal apology from TriPoint Residential Holdings, signed by their VP of Development. 2. a scanned affidavit from the interim Silver Pines HOA board admitting that perimeter expansions and legal threats were issued without consent or authorization. 3. A public statement prepared for the Marvin County Herald, approved by the Attorney General's office. We, the undersigned, acknowledge the unlawful overreach committed by former Silver Pines HOA President Karen Holbrook, acting without board approval or proper legal grounding. We extend our deepest apologies to Mr. Jonathan Mayfield and the residents affected by these actions. No conditions, no disclaimers, just guilt. In writing, Gus was the first to break the silence. That's it, they folded. But Jonathan didn't look satisfied. He set the letter down. They didn't fold, he muttered. They surrendered, quietly, like cowards. Well, technically, that's what we wanted. No, Jonathan said. What I wanted was for them to say it where everyone could hear it. I want them to stand where they tried to erase me. Gus blinked. What are you saying? Jonathan stepped outside, looked up at the sycamore tree. I want them on my land. I want them to look at what they tried to take, and I want everyone else to see it too. The invitation. The next morning, Jonathan posted one final message to the now massive Facebook group. This Sunday at 2 p.m., a different kind of gathering, no signs, no speeches, just presence. Bring a folding chair, bring your neighbors. The people who tried to erase our boundaries will be standing on the soil they lost. And they'll be apologizing, not to me, to all of you. The post hit 1,500 shares in a day. Local officials confirmed attendance. Channel 7 planned live coverage. The interim HOA board, under strong encouragement from the AG's office, sent confirmation they would appear. And TriPoint's representative, under legal advisement, agreed to deliver the apology personally. The ceremony. Begin Sunday, 1:50 p.m. The lawn was full before the hours struck. No grills this time, no music, just people. Hundreds. Grandparents with lawn chairs, veterans with flags, teenagers with cameras, kids holding cardboard hearts that said, "This is our land, too." The crowd parted as a single black sedan rolled down the gravel. Kinlan stepped forward first. He looked like a man on his third funeral in a week. He held up the typed statement, but didn't read from it. Mr. Mayfield, residents, neighbors, I won't insult you with corporate language. I came here because we failed, and not just legally. We failed ethically. We allowed ourselves to be complicit in a plan that disrespected boundaries, not just property lines, but moral ones. He turned to Jonathan directly. No development is worth destroying someone's home, or their memory of it, and no paper map can ever outrank the roots beneath your feet. He bowed his head. Then Lisa Barrett took her place. On behalf of the Silver Pines HOA, what remains of it, we acknowledge that former President Karen Holbrook abused her position. We are working to dissolve every action she took without board consent. And we're pushing for new leadership elections with mandatory homeowner votes. Then she looked to the crowd. This HOA exists to serve, not rule. That promise was broken, and now we rebuild. Silence. Then someone in the crowd began clapping. Then others joined, and then, for the first time in months, Jonathan smiled. A quiet act of restoration. After the speeches, no one rushed away. People stayed, talked, hugged, walked the edge of Jonathan's lawn like it was holy ground. One by one, they came up to him. A man who once paid a fake HOA fee of $900, thanking him for showing it was okay to fight back. A mother who'd removed her trampoline after a violation letter, now planning to put it back up. a realtor, offering pro bono services to elderly residents caught in HOA zoning disputes. Even Lisa Barrett returned, this time with a small potted tree. "Sycamore sapling," she said. "Same species. Thought it might belong here, too." Jonathan took it. "We'll call it Karen's replacement." They both laughed, gently but truthfully. Final image. As the sun dipped behind the roofline, a Channel 7 photographer captured the scene. Jonathan, standing beside two sycamores. Children playing near his grill. HOA officials watching quietly from the edge. And in the foreground, a sign someone had planted in the grass. This land was never up for negotiation. Chapter 9. Karen Alone. Her house had never been silent. Not really. Even when she was alone, the click of her nails against the keyboard, the buzz of her phone, the humming wine cooler in the corner, they created a kind of authority, a hum of control, a rhythm of relevance. Now, all that remained was the clock. Tick, tick, tick. Karen Holbrook sat alone in the living room of her two-story modernist home, blinds drawn, screen dimmed, phone turned face down for the first time in a decade. The HOA email account had been locked. The board seat revoked. Her name had appeared on the news every night for a week. She'd become a meme, and worse, a metaphor. The collapse of image. They didn't come with torches. No one shouted at her door. No graffiti. It was much worse than that. People stopped seeing her. At the grocery store, the clerk no longer smiled. At the dry cleaners, the owner who once greeted her with "Madam President" now avoided eye contact. At church, her usual pew was quietly filled by someone else, and when she raised her hand to speak at the HOA reinstatement meeting, no one even acknowledged her. Lisa Barrett had simply said, "Miss Holbrook, as you are no longer a board member, public comment can be submitted in writing." The words hit harder than any slap. The lawsuit. But Karen was not raised to surrender. Her father had taught her that perception was everything, that lawsuits, even frivolous ones, sent a message. So she did what she knew best. She filed. Karen Holbrook versus Jonathan Mayfield et al. Allegation: defamation, reputational damage, and public humiliation with malicious intent. Filed in Marlow County Superior Court. Demands: $150,000 in damages, a public retraction, and removal of all related social media posts. She dressed in her best navy suit, took a car to the courthouse, and handed the papers to the clerk herself, with the tight-lipped smile of someone trying to pretend they still mattered. Then she waited. The answer came fast. Too fast. A motion to dismiss, signed by a coalition of attorneys representing Jonathan Mayfield, Gus Darnell, the Bakers, Emily Wu, and the Ohio Civil Liberties Consortium, which had joined the case voluntarily. The motion attached. The HOA emails Karen herself had written. The false cease and desist letters. Evidence that Karen had impersonated a legal authority by using a paralegal signature on official documents. A sworn statement from the HOA secretary, confirming Karen acted without board approval in every instance. The first page of the filing ended with a single line in bold. This lawsuit is not about defamation. It is about a former authority figure attempting to reassert power through intimidation, in violation of public interest and basic legal standards. Karen stared at the motion on her screen, the glow of her laptop turning her face pale. She didn't blink. The final blow. The county clerk's office sent her a letter 1 week later. The court had denied the suit, with prejudice, meaning she couldn't file it again, and worse, the judge had issued a public statement. The court finds the claims not only without merit, but part of a broader pattern of personal retaliation under the guise of governance. Ms. Holbrook's behavior is emblematic of the dangers of unaccountable HOA leadership. That line was picked up by journalists across the state. She wasn't just a meme anymore. She was a case study. A call with no answer that night, Karen tried to call her brother, then her niece, then her old friend from law school. No one picked up. One number had been disconnected. One voicemail said, "I'm out of the country." The last one simply rang and rang. She set the phone down, let it vibrate off the table. The mirror scene. She walked to the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror for the first time in days. Her makeup was gone, her eyes swollen, hair flat and lifeless. The strong, cold, immaculate woman who once dictated community policy like scripture was now just a silhouette. No badge, no title, no voice. For the first time, she saw not what they took, but what she had become, and what she'd never been. 1. Last envelope. Monday morning. A plain, white envelope arrived by mail. No return address. Karen opened it carefully. Inside, a photograph. Jonathan's backyard. The new sapling sycamore in the foreground. Dozens of people sitting in folding chairs laughing. 2 children painting rocks. A firefighter in uniform smiling at a small girl. And beneath it, handwritten in black ink, "This is what community looks like." Karen stared at it. And for once, she didn't reach for a pen, a phone, or a folder. She just sat and wept. Chapter 10. The fence stays down. The wind was soft the morning Jonathan took off the hinges. 3 simple metal pins. A gate he'd built himself out of reclaimed cedar and iron from an old firehouse railing. It didn't look like much, but for 30 years, that gate marked the back edge of his property and the beginning of their land. The land Karen tried to claim. The land the HOA tried to annex, the land the developer tried to connect to. Now, it was just grass, and Jonathan decided that grass didn't need a gate. Shaka fence. Disassembled, it wasn't dramatic. No crowd, no speeches, just the rhythmic creak of the screwdriver, the smell of soil, and the occasional chirp of birds in the oak tree above. By 10:42 a.m., the fence panel was laid gently in the back of his shed. By 10:46, the gate posts stood bare, 2 pillars with no task left to perform. And at exactly 11 a.m., he pulled up a single wooden sign, driven gently into the earth. It read, in simple black letters, "Neighbors welcome." The new HOA board arrives. That afternoon, 3 people arrived at his property, respectfully parked at the edge, and approached on foot. Lisa Barrett, the new acting HOA president, led the group. Behind her, Emily Wu, recently elected as communications liaison, and a third person Jonathan hadn't met, Marcus Hill, a retired school principal now serving as treasurer. "May we come in?" Lisa asked with a half smile. "There's no gate to stop you," Jonathan replied. They walked together to the sycamore and sat at the weathered picnic bench where it had all started. Lisa unfolded a document. "We finished the charter reform." "Let me guess," Jonathan said. "You took out Section 14B, burned it. And the fake perimeter maps? All revoked. We're going back to basics, voluntary compliance, full transparency. Every policy must be voted on by actual residents." Jonathan nodded. "Good. but that's not why we're here. Marcos set a small box on the table. Inside, a bronze plaque.